Welcome to Astro Odyssey. Explore the universe. From the earliest days of the space race to the modern era of reusable rockets, space launches have always balanced on the edge of disaster. A rocket is at its core. A giant controlled explosion, thousands of tons of fuel igniting beneath a fragile spacecraft and its crew. One small error, one faulty component, or one rushed decision can turn a launch into a catastrophe. Over the decades, several launches have come dangerously close to total failure, while others ended in tragedy. Each of these moments reminds us how risky the journey to space truly is. Here are 10 of the most dangerous rocket launches in history. In March 1965, NASA tested the Atlas Center AC-5 rocket, a powerful vehicle designed to carry heavy payloads into deep space. The rocket lifted off normally, but seconds later, a failure in the insulation system caused the super-cold liquid hydrogen fuel to overheat. The tank ruptured, and the rocket exploded into a massive fireball just above the launch pad. The blast caused serious damage to the launch complex and forced engineers to rethink how they handled cryogenic fuels. It was a harsh lesson about the dangers of using liquid hydrogen in early rocket technology. More than 3 decades later, on January 17, 1997, a Delta II rocket launched from Cape Canaveral, carrying a GPS satellite. Just 13 seconds into the flight, one of the solid rocket boosters failed catastrophically. The rocket broke apart in midair, creating a huge explosion. Flaming debris rained down over nearby towns, shattering windows and scattering burning fragments across the ground. Although no one was killed, the incident showed how dangerous a launch failure could be near populated areas. In the late 1960s, the Soviet Union was racing the United States to land a human on the moon. Their answer to the American Saturn V was the enormous N-1 rocket, powered by 30 engines at its base. On July 3, 1969, during its second launch attempt, disaster struck. Seconds after liftoff, an engine failure triggered a chain reaction. The rocket lost control, fell back onto the launch pad, and exploded in a blast so powerful, it is often described as the largest non-nuclear explosion in human history. The launch complex was completely destroyed, and the Soviet moon program never fully recovered. Not every dangerous launch ends in an explosion. In March 1966, the Gemini 8 mission carried astronauts Neil Armstrong and David Scott into orbit aboard a Titan II rocket. The launch itself went smoothly, and the crew successfully docked with a target vehicle, something never done before. But soon after docking, the spacecraft began spinning uncontrollably. The rotation became so violent that the astronauts were close to blacking out. Armstrong used the emergency re-entry thrusters to stop the spin, saving their lives but forcing the mission to abort. It was one of the closest calls in early human specs. Another terrifying moment occurred in April 1975. During the Soyuz 18A mission, the rocket suffered a major malfunction during ascent when the upper stage separated incorrectly. The spacecraft's escape system activated automatically, pulling the capsule away from the failing rocket. The crew endured forces of up to 21 times the force of gravity as the capsule plunged back toward Earth. They landed on a snowy mountain slope near the Chinese border. It's battered, but alive. Few astronauts or cosmonauts have ever experienced such extreme conditions and survived. In April 1981, the first flight of the Space Shuttle Columbia carried astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen into orbit. This mission, known as STS-1, was one of the most dangerous launches ever attempted. Unlike previous spacecraft, the shuttle was being tested for the very first time, with humans already on board. After launch, engineers discovered that hundreds of heat shield tiles were damaged or missing. If the damage had been worse, the shuttle could have burned up during re-entry. Fortunately, Columbia returned safely. But the mission highlighted the enormous risks of flying an unproven spacecraft. Decades later, in July 2013, a Russian Proton-M rocket lifted off carrying navigation satellites. Almost immediately, the rocket began to tilt sideways. Instead of climbing into the sky, it veered off course, spiraled out of control, and slammed into the ground in a massive explosion just seconds after launch. The rocket was carrying hundreds of tons of highly toxic fuel, and the crash created a dangerous cloud of chemicals near the launch site. Investigators later discovered that key sensors had been installed upside down. A simple mistake with catastrophic consequences. One of the most dramatic last-second rescues in space history occurred in September 1983 with the Soyuz T-101 mission. The rocket sat on the launch pad, fully fueled, with 2 cosmonauts strapped inside the capsule. Moments before launch, a fuel leak ignited, engulfing the rocket in flames. With only seconds to spare, ground control activated the escape tower. The capsule blasted away from the burning rocket just before it exploded. The time between the escape system firing and the explosion was less than 2 seconds. Without that system, the crew would have had no chance of survival. Perhaps the most well-known rocket disaster occurred on January 28, 1986. When the Space Shuttle Challenger lifted off on mission TS-51L, the launch took place in unusually cold weather. Just 73 seconds after liftoff, a faulty O-ring in one of the solid rocket boosters failed. Flames escaped, burned through the external tank, and caused the shuttle to break apart in the sky. All 7 crew members were killed, including teacher Krista McAuliffe, who had been selected to inspire students across the United States. The tragedy shocked the world and forced NASA to suspend shuttle flights for nearly 3 years. The deadliest rocket disaster in history, however, happened in secret. On October 24, 1960, the Soviet Union was preparing to launch an R-16 intercontinental ballistic missile. Engineers were under intense pressure to meet political deadlines, and safety procedures were ignored. Workers continued making adjustments while the rocket was fully fueled. Suddenly, the engines ignited on the launch pad. The missile exploded into a massive fireball, killing more than 100 people, including Marshal Mitrofan Nedelin, a top Soviet commander. The catastrophe was hidden from the world for decades and remains the deadliest rocket accident ever recorded. Space exploration has always walked a narrow line between triumph and tragedy. Every launch is a delicate balance of engineering precision, powerful fuels, and human courage. The disasters and near disasters in this list were not just moments of failure, they were lessons. Lessons that improved rocket designs, strengthened safety procedures, and ultimately saved lives. The road to the stars has never been easy, but with each risk and each hard-earned lesson, humanity has moved one step closer to the heavens.